The thunder and lightning in the sky neighed through the dark clouds, and the blood-red smell was diffused on the noisy ruins. The wailing and sword shadow that had just dissipated opened again in the wind, the piled-up remains hideous and terrifying, and the thick breath almost suffocated people. A young man with his head full of blood was dead on his head, slowly opened his eyes, the dazzling sunlight reflected in the eyeshadow, making him involuntarily squinted slightly. Not far away, the sound of the collision of weapons and the wailing of human beings before they died became clearer, shocking the young boy who was still in a confused state. "Where am I? What happened?" The boy subconsciously wiped his wet forehead, fixed his eyes, rolled his eyes, and almost fainted. "What's the situation with this hand? I just played a few Warhammers in Total War at home, and he came to this kind of ghost place as soon as he opened his eyes." Richard's awkward eyes revealed fear. Although he worked in a funeral home and saw many dead people, he had never seen scenes a few times, not to mention that it was blood from his forehead. Richard moved his body gently, his expression relaxed slightly. "Fortunately, my body is fine, and I don't feel any pain." Relieved, Richard just thought of getting up, the corner of his eyes suddenly turned to the scene of the battle not far away. A dozen men were holding spears and fighting with 3 majestic green monsters. The bright green wrinkled skin, the protruding fangs, the bulging muscles, and the rusty iron axe constantly waving in his hand. Those 3 monsters who did not lose the wind during the siege are indeed the green-skinned orcs that Richard often fudges in the game. As for the dozen or so humans, like Richard, they have the face of an Asian yellow race, and they wear coarse cloth from the Han and Tang ancient times. Except for the spears in their hands, most people don't wear them around their waists. With a short weapon, some are small axes, some are long daggers. After seeing this scene, Richard subconsciously touched his waist. When some people's lives were threatened, the first reaction was to find a weapon for self-defense. Richard is not the kind of coward who sits and waits to die. Although he feels a lot of pressure to come to this environment suddenly, Richard doesn't want to try the smell of death. After touching his waist with his right hand, Richard looked stiff. He didn't even have a spare weapon. Slightly panicked, Richard did not dare to stand up to attract outsiders' attention, and searched on the surrounding ground sideways. The effort paid off. A long dagger with a gap was lying quietly on Richard's left hand. Richard quickly stretched out his right hand to pick it up and hid it under his body. At this moment, the orcs on the side of Richard in the battle group suddenly slashed 2 humans into flight, and the terrifying brute force made Richard's face twitch unnaturally. When Richard noticed that the other party's gaze swept toward his position, he kicked his legs very seriously, raised his head, and stared in his eyes and pretended to die. It's a pity that God didn't seem to want to let go of this pretending to be dead. In Richard's staring eyes, the orc was thrust into the position where he was lying after being inserted a spear from behind by a human. "Come here." Before the orc fell, he turned around with an axe and took off most of the human shoulder who had attacked behind him, seeing that he couldn't live anymore. After killing the sneak-attacking humans, this beast with a sharp chest was panting and sat down less than a meter beside the pretending Li Cha. The blue-grey pupils were just right with the pretending Li Cha. The orc looked at Richard, who was lying on the ground with blood on his forehead, and his tyrannical face couldn't help becoming confused. This human teenager is obviously covered with blood and brain plasma, but his head is intact, without a break. The green-skinned orc with a natural desire for destruction looked at Richard, who was intact, and felt uncomfortable. He ignored the wound on his chest, enduring the pain, and resecured the rusty iron axe in his hand. After seeing the green-skinned orc's movements, Richard couldn't hold on anymore. He got up from the ground at the fastest speed in his life, holding a long dagger tightly in his right hand, and a fierce tiger pounced and slammed into this because he lost too much energy and reaction. The green-skinned orcs dropped a lot. The dark red blood of the green-skinned orc spewed out, and Richard severely pulled out the long dagger that had been stuck in the opponent's throat, and inserted it again. Wyack! A weak roar came from the broken throat. Even at this time, the green-skinned orc still grasped Richard's arm holding the long dagger. Richard felt the green hands on his arms that looked like iron tongs, his eyes were full of incredible colors. All to this point, the other party still has such great strength? In other words, the strength difference between the two sides is too large. Even if the green-skinned orcs are extremely weak, their strength is still greater than their own. Wow, you fairy board! Was grabbed with his right hand, and in a hurry, Richard made a fist with his left hand and a left hook hit the green-skinned orc's blood-spraying neck. Immediately afterwards, Richard felt the strength of the green hand holding his right arm suddenly reduced. He took the opportunity to break away from the palm of the orc, and fiercely inserted the long dagger again. Twice and 3 times. Richard was frightened by the tenacious vitality of the green-skinned orc. Even if the green-skinned orc was already lying on the ground and no longer moving, he still held the long dagger repeatedly in the thrusting game. Until his tired forehead sweated, Richard let go of his palms and sat down on the ground. The thick neck of the green-skinned orc corpse had been pierced. The knot, is it over? The frightened Richard didn't hear the mechanical sound playing in his head at all. He thought he was too frightened to have auditory hallucinations. After killing the green-skinned orcs, he subconsciously turned his head and looked at the battle group. Next, more than a dozen humans will drop a third of the number of people. But in the end, the green-skinned orc, no matter how strong he was unable to return to the sky. After replacing a human head, he was inserted into his body by several spears, and fell to the ground with blood all over his body. At this time, there were only 8 living people left on the battlefield, including Richard. Looking at the corpses on the ground, only 5 green-skinned orcs died, but nearly 20 humans fell. Terrible battle loss ratio. When Richard was stunned, the human soldiers had already begun to deal with the corpses on the ground. They did not care about the corpses of those compatriots, but gathered the corpses of the green-skinned orcs, and even the broken parts were not spared. A sturdy, medium-sized man came to Li Cha and looked at Li Cha, who was covered with blood on his forehead. A suspicious color flashed in his eyes. "Richard, your kid is lucky, he can survive if he is smashed in the skull by a green-skinned orc. It turns out that the body I crossed over is also called Richard. I don't know if it is a coincidence or it was specially arranged by a crossing god. However, even though Richard had crossed over, he did not inherit any memory of his original body. Who is the man who is obviously the leader in front of him?" Richard looked at each other with a trace of embarrassment and confusion, not knowing what to call him. Ma Hongji saw Richard's gaze and smiled and said, "Why, I was knocked stupid by a green-skinned orc," Ma Hongji said as he moved the corpse beside Richard with the people behind him. They seemed to have been accustomed to seeing the corpse, and there was no expression of surprise when they saw the green-skinned orc's neck. "No, I just can't remember many things," Richard answered and stood up to help them lift the body of the green-skinned orc. Seeing Richard stepping forward to help, Ma Hongji's complexion eased a lot, and he carried the corpse of the green-skinned orc as he walked and said, "If you can survive, you can make a profit. Please go back and let the doctor take a look. Don't leave any sequelae. By the way, you won't even forget my name." Richard smiled awkwardly, "I can't remember not only your name, but everyone's name." After Richard finished speaking, the people around couldn't help showing sympathy to him. This situation is too rare. Ma Hongji was silent for a while, and the others threw the last corpse of the green-skinned orc into the pile, patted Richard on the shoulder and said, "My name is Ma Hongji, I am the leader of the patrol team, although you are not mine. Your subordinate, but your very senior has already died in battle. According to Datang's rules, you are temporarily obedient to me. Other situations will naturally be told when you return to the village. As for your fellow robe..." Ma Hongji turned his eyes to the human corpses lying in a mess, and the answer was self-evident. "Anyone with me, died?" Richard asked in a trembling voice. He is not sorrowful, but fearful of the situation in this world. It is not difficult to see from the situation that he is a low-level soldier. As the name suggests, the leader of a small team of 10 people, even such a small officer can command himself. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com is obviously his identity. The most important thing is that in such a small-scale encounter, more than half of them were killed. And the opponent is not a serious human, but a terribly tough green-skinned orc. By the way, now we must first figure out where we are. According to Ma Hongji, this is the boundary of the Tang dynasty. Is it the same as the Tang dynasty in his previous life? My lord, where are we in the Tang dynasty? You forgot even this. You and I are both rural patrol teams belonging to Dashi town. You are a young man recruited by Ljia village. You are a recruiter, not a hereditary soldier who grows Yanjiashan. But in today's world, you shouldn't fantasize about leaving this level of identity. You should exercise your body well and become a warrior as soon as possible to survive better. You have to remember, don't think about running away and surrendering when you encounter greenskins. Those greenskins like the taste of human flesh and never take prisoners, and they must run faster than you. If they were caught back, it would be better to die in battle. Ma Hongji glanced at Richard, who was flustered, and solemnly reminded him. He didn't want this amnesiac recruit to flee. Not only would he die without a place to bury him, but it would also harm his family. It is not easy for the Han to settle in this land. Every young and strong person is full of strength. The precious ones should not die in their own hands. Ljia village, Dashi town. What is this place? The history teacher has never taught such detailed geography. Richard, who was anxious to know his time, saw Ma Hongji turn around and leave, and hurriedly asked, which area of Datang does Dashi town belong to? Ma Hongji glanced at Richard and uttered 5 words, Angzi de Hufu. It's really that big Tang. Angzi de Hufu, the name Richard has naturally heard, as long as anyone who has studied history knows this. This is the jurisdiction mechanism established by the Tang dynasty to expand its territory to the west. During its heyday, the jurisdiction area includes the later Xinjiang and Kazakhs. East and southeast of Stan, all of Kyrgyzstan, eastern Tajikistan, most of Afghanistan, northeastern Iran, the eastern half of Turkmenistan, most of Uzbekistan, etc. However, Richard does not think that he has traveled to the Great Tang in history, because the green orcs in the Total War of the Warhammer cannot appear in the Great Tang in the history of the Earth. Except for Ma Hongji, the other soldiers seemed to be unfamiliar with Richard's original body, and had no intention of coming up to talk to each other. Just experienced a tragic battle, everyone's mood is very heavy, no one is still in the mood to chat and fart. Richard picked up some dry branches according to Ma Hongji's instructions. He didn't understand why these people were not the first to deal with the corpses of their fellow soldiers, but these green-skinned orcs? Richard looked at the corpse of the green-skinned orc burning in the fire, and a flash of light flashed in his mind. He remembered the terrible setting of the green-skinned orc in the Warhammer Total War. Green-skinned orcs do not reproduce sexually through ordinary creatures, but asexual reproduction similar to plants. They are monsters that grow from the ground. Is still a group of creatures keen to kill and fight. Green-skinned orcs can not only increase their population by planting, if their corpses are not burned, after a period of time, they will rot and merge into the soil and become the seeds of new green skins. It is said that if you plant a green leather in spring, you will harvest a mountain of green leather in summer. Because of this, after killing the green-skinned orcs, all their bodies must be burned down. After the green-skinned orcs' bodies were all burned, Ma Hongji took other people to dig the corpses for his fellow robes. Everyone knows that burying a corpse in the soil is of little use. The sensitive beast can turn the corpse out in minutes and eat the belly. Digging a pit and burying the corpse is more of remembrance and respect. No one wants to be after death. The mob wilderness. The personal belongings of the soldiers were collected, and the intact weapons were also gathered together, ready to be taken back. Personal items will be given to the deceased's relatives together with the pension, and weapons will be recycled. Obviously, these soldiers are not rich. Richard looked at the commoners on everyone. They didn't look like a soldier at all, let alone armor. They didn't even have a uniform. It was completely different from the Tang Xiong soldiers in his impression. Is it because of frequent wars that the world's supplies are extremely scarce? Richard observed the movements of the people and the items they were carrying, and speculated in his heart. Everyone, go back with me to report. After this mission, we should be able to rest for a while. After cleaning up the corpse and debris, Ma Hongji said to everyone. When came, 3 dissatisfaction made up, but when I went back, it became 1. Such a huge casualty, but Richard only saw numbness and gratitude on the faces of the surviving soldiers. What does this mean? Could it be said that dead people in this world have become so commonplace? Ma Hongji took a packed package and handed it to Richard. These are your personal belongings in camp. Take your weapons and go back. I will report your situation. After receiving what Ma Hongji handed over, Richard couldn't help but ask, how many soldiers like us are in Angzi Doha Mansion? Ma Hongji looked at Richard with an inexplicable expression. After your brain was knocked, your thoughts have changed. The Angzi Protectorate is vast, and the office is far away from our Dashi town. How can I know that the entire Angzi is the situation of the Guardian? Let alone the Angzi Protectorate, even if the number of soldiers under the jurisdiction of Dashi town is beyond the reach of people like us. Moreover, Dashi town recruits young and strong people to enter the new barracks for training because of combat shortages. It is no exaggeration to say that the strength of Dashi town changes every month. We don't have to worry about the above things, and we don't have the qualifications to worry about it. After going back, I still think about how to enhance my strength and live better when the next mission arrives. Today, this kind of luck is not something that I can encounter every mission. After finishing talking, Ma Hongji went to summon other people on the road without looking back. Richard was hospitalized by Ma Hongji personally because of his injured brain and amnesia. The other soldiers packed their belongings by themselves. If the weapon was damaged, he would choose one of the intact weapons that he had gathered, and report it at that time. Here, there is no taboo on the weapons of the dead. If it weren't for the Datang military order that clearly stipulated that the personal belongings of the deceased were not allowed to be privately hidden, I am afraid that these soldiers would have stripped away the valuables of the dead. Richard followed the team of 8 people and walked slowly to the south. The sun in the sky was no different from the earth. Not long after, the endless rice fields were reflected in Richard's field of vision. Ma Hongji said to Richard seemingly unintentionally, our task this time is to clean up the green-skinned orcs who broke into this paddy field. Unexpectedly, it was originally reported that there were 2 green-skinned orcs, but in fact they encountered 5. This has caused so many deaths. Ma Hongji said while observing Richard's look, and found that his eyes were still blank, and then he was finally convinced that Richard had forgotten everything. When dusk fell, a low wooden wall caught Richard's vision. There are scattered soldiers on duty to patrol the wooden wall, and a few arrow towers stand on the corners. Below the wooden wall is a wooden gate several people wide. A wooden plaque is hung on the gate, which reads Dashi Town. Words. The font is not the simplified Chinese characters that Richard has seen in his previous life, but he can understand it. At the gate, there are 4 soldiers hiding in the shade and resting with spears. These 4 soldiers are not like Richard's and his party, and they don't even have a uniform. They are all wearing black and red cloth robes. Although there are a lot of patches on them, they are unified in style and look like a regular army. The 4 soldiers knew Ma Hongji and his party. After saying hello to Ma Hongji, they lazily glanced at the sparse number of people, and let Li Cha and the others enter the city. After entering the city, Ma Hongji led Richard and his party to turn left and right, and came to a simple residential house and said, the clerk who reported now has been dismissed. Let's sleep in this temporary barracks for 1 night, and we should be able to go home tomorrow. Ma Hongji dropped the words and left the house alone and walked out. The others walked towards the dwellings. There are many thatched beddings and the walls of the houses to shelter from the wind and rain, which is many times better than sleeping and sleeping. The tired Richard picked up a thatch, sat down, took out the dough and water, took a bite, and almost vomited it out. Is this stuff eaten by humans or fed to pigs? Oh no, I used to eat better than this noodles in my old family pigs. Richard thought angrily. He looked up and saw that the soldiers around him might be very hungry. Such unpalatable noodles were swallowed cleanly. Well, it seems that my KFC, McDonald's, Starbucks, can only meet in a dream. Grumbling, a strange noise reminded Richard that his stomach was being tortured by hunger. When people are hungry to the limit, they can even eat the bark of the grass roots. What's more, although the taste of this noodle cake is not good, it is made of food anyway. This bread is a military ration issued by the government, and ordinary poor people can't eat it all. Of course, Richard didn't know this. After enduring the nausea and filling his stomach, Richard Lee felt his mouth full of weird bitterness. He lay on the thatch and thought quietly, I am offended, which way is the who threw me like a dead man? The backward and poor ancient world? Forget about crossing, give me a golden finger anyway, no matter how bad, I don't want any princes and nobles, it's not bad to cross to become a rich man. Although there were few entertainment items in ancient times, there was a preferential policy for 3 wives and 4 concubines. It would be nice to experience the customs of ancient women, but what is the situation of crossing into a small soldier gazi? Where is this through welfare? Reading www.yunsha.com is pure torture. Just when Richard complained, a reminder sounded abruptly in his mind. The horseback riding and slashing functions are perfect and online, and the faction forces are randomly selected based on the sense of belonging of the host's soul, and the selection is in progress. Congratulations to the host for extracting the ancient Ming Dynasty forces from the earth, and obtaining the Ming Dynasty forces troop tree. The personal panel has been generated, please check by the host. The conditions for obtaining Qun coins are mature. By killing the enemy, Qun coins can be plundered. The higher the enemy level, the more Qun coins can be plundered, winning the battle can get a large amount of Qun coins. The larger the battle scale, the more abundant Qun coins will be obtained. Obtaining official positions in the imperial court can get Qun coins. The higher the official position and function, the more Qun coins will be obtained. You can get a large amount of Qun coins when you siege the city and land. The amount of Qun coins depends on the area of the attacked area and the number of urban population. The establishment of a country can obtain a huge amount of Qun coins. You need to occupy at least one densely populated city before you can build your own country, and you have to promote the country to the surrounding forces. Massacre and destruction of the country can also obtain a huge amount of luck coins. Qun coin is the general currency of the system. Soldiers can be recruited at this stage. After the prestige level is increased, more Qun coin exchange options can be opened. The prestige level needs to be upgraded through prestige tasks. The higher the prestige level, the more functions the system opens, and the types and ranks of the exchanged units will be increased accordingly. Li Cha lay on the thatch dumbfounded, listening to the reverberating mechanical sounds in his mind. His face was first horrified, then at a loss, and finally turned into a color of ecstasy. Richard looked at the other 7 soldiers subconsciously. They were already lying on the thatch and sleeping in their clothes separately, and didn't notice the strange expression of Richard at all. Richard watched those strangers who were sleeping, and a dangerous thought arose in his mind for no apparent reason. In the prompt sound, the words "kill the enemy to get luck coins" kept appearing in his mind. Richard took a deep breath and shook his head alone. Although these people are not relatives to me, and they can't even call me their names, they have no grievances with me. It's really a bit tricky to start like this, and it's in Dashi town, which belongs to an orderly town. If I kill someone, I will surely find out soon by the Datang government, then. After waking up, Richard's eyes became calm again, his mind moved slightly, and the personal panel of the horse riding and hacking system was called up. Although this system is called horse riding and slashing, it actually only inherits the function of recruiting soldiers. There is no personal attribute bonus in horse riding and slashing. Name: Li Cha's area, Dashi Town, Angzi Doha Mansion, Tang Dynasty. Personal realm: Ordinary people. Reputation rating: 1 star. Can recruit Tier 1 soldiers, Guardian Militia System soldiers under his command. None occupied area, none Chi Luck coin, 0 prestige quest, earn 10 Chi Luck coins, and increase the prestige level after completion. Note: this system is a complex of strategy games played by the host in the previous life. When certain conditions are met, the system will undergo transformation and evolution. It may become an Empire Age system or a full-scale war system, and eventually it can evolve into a Red Alert system. And the StarCraft system. This system has been integrated with the rules of another world. The host needs to complete the prestige task at all levels to unlock the upgrade system. Every time the prestige level is increased, the host will be surprised. That's it, I said. Why the name of the cheat finger is so familiar. However, this system is really stingy. I don't even have a novice gift package. I still have to find a way to earn luck coins by myself. Fortunately, the price of recruitable Tier 1 soldiers is not high, and only 1 luck coin is needed. By the way, what is the personal realm? Could it be that there are other people in this world besides ordinary people? Richard couldn't help but recall the martial artist that Ma Hongji had told him during the day. If he had guessed correctly, this world might very well be a martial arts world. Think about it, that green-skinned orc's strength is not something that an ordinary adult man can fight against. Coupled with the perverted fecundity of green-skinned, if humans had no high-end force, they would have been swallowed up by green-skinned. Well, the most important thing now is to earn luck coins. Fighting and building a country are too far away from me. If you want to earn luck coins, you can only rely on killing. Richard's gaze moved involuntarily to the sleeping soldiers again, thinking to himself, the Chi Luck coin acquisition reminder said killing enemies instead of humans. The term enemy should have a deeper meaning. Ding! The host trigger system can answer the question. The host and the enemies killed by the host and its system soldiers in the non-campaign mode can get Chi Luck coins. The enemy here refers to the host and the host's system soldiers with hostility or resentment and other negatives. Emotional humans and other intelligent creatures, if they have a good intention and neutral attitude towards the identification of the host and the host's system, they will not gain anything after being killed. This system aims to support the host to become the master of another world, not to become a machine that only knows to kill. Well, like I thought, killing is just a means, not an end. Richard went through the personal panel again, and after making sure that there were no omissions, he quickly fell asleep after a day of exhaustion. With the golden finger, Richard's pressure to survive has dropped sharply, and he no longer holds a pessimistic attitude towards the future. He even became an alien emperor in a dream, taking the place of the Tang dynasty, stepping on Central Asian countries and punching European barbarians. The most important thing is that Richard dreamed that he had opened a big harem and selected beauties of various nationalities. Every day, he could change flowers and try different exotic customs. It's a pity that Richard's life experience is too shallow. Most of the beauties in the dream are similar to the heroines of an island country action movie and the internet celebrities he has seen in his previous life. Richard, it's time to report. An abrupt voice interrupted Richard's dream of spring and autumn. He wiped the corners of his wet mouth, his eyes blurred and slowly got up from the thatch. This place sleeps so much that Richard, who is used to the comfortable soft bed in his previous life, is very uncomfortable. Fortunately, this body has become accustomed to the harsh living environment, but there is no discomfort such as soreness and swelling. Ma Hongji coldly watched Richard stand up, then greeted the others to go out together. I slept because of the kimono, and the steps of putting on the clothes have been omitted. Richard picked up the bags and bags around him to keep up with everyone. As for washing his face and brushing his teeth, Sorry, this group of big-head soldiers at the bottom does not have that treatment. Walking out of the residential house, Richard frowned and looked at Ma Hongji, who led the team in front of him. For some reason, Ma Hongji is very cold towards him today. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com even deliberately alienated him. As for the other soldiers, they were originally not from the same village as Richard. They were village patrol teams that were temporarily recruited. They didn't know each other for a long time, let alone any friendship. After everyone learned that Richard had lost his memory, they basically regarded him as a half-fool, and no one came up to talk to him. However, with the golden finger system, Richard was full of confidence and didn't care about this little detail, and walked towards the office gate of Dashi town in the end of his own self-care. This Datang is different from the Tang dynasty institutions in the history of the earth. The most basic administrative unit is the town, and the county above the town is the county. Therefore, Dashi town has its own yamen, which is also the basis for the management of the Tang court. The administrative unit integrates administrative, judicial, and military powers. If it is the mainland of Datang, there may be other regulatory agencies that decentralize powers, but in remote areas like Angzi Dohu, the power of local yamen is basically the power of each emperor. Of course, due to the continuous harassment of the greenskins and the beasts, the lives of these earth emperors were not easy. In this area of Angzi Dohufu, in addition to the greenskins and the beasts, there are also a large number of foreign ethnic groups. The Tang people call them Simu people. Although the country of the Simu people is expanding in the Tang dynasty and the greenskin and the beasts destroyed during the plunder, but the base of the Simu people is there after all. Is also a big threat to the Chinese who have few immigrants. The most important thing is that because of the enslavement of the conquered Simu by the Datang regime, the relationship between the two is not harmonious. In order to maintain its rule, the Datang government can only implement a national military service system in Angzi Dohufu. Like Richard Li, although it is an independent voluntary recruitment in name, in fact, he has no ordinary youths like him. Other options. The yamen in Dashi town is undoubtedly the tallest building in the town. Because the public security environment around the yamen is the best, the wealthy families of Dashi town live together here. Over time, the neighborhoods around the yamen in Dashi town have become a veritable rich district. Since ancient times, the consumption power of the rich has been higher than that of the poor, so of course the most prosperous market has been formed in the rich area. Of course, it is not allowed to set up a market outside the main gate of yamen. Richard and his party did not enter the town hall of Dashi town, but came outside the door of a private house next to the yamen. This private house is a place specially set up in Dashi town to collect statistics and report the rewards of soldiers from surrounding villages. This kind of trivial matter is not managed by the guards of Dashi town personally. They are all handled by the staff who have no rank below. However, in order to boost morale in the border areas, Datang still imposed strict rewards and punishments on military merits. After Richard and his party came to the door of this house, they were intercepted by the guards with 2 waist-long knives and holding water and fire sticks at the door. Ma Hongji was the first to walk into the house. Richard looked at the other soldiers as they were accustomed to, speculating that this kind of reward should not be collectively received. Of course, this is the place where the living people receive rewards. Yesterday, Ma Hongji reported the personal objects and basic information of the dead. A notice was posted outside the house with a reward that is valid all year round. A pair of goblin ears will reward 1 Tang coin, a pair of orc ears will reward 10 Tang coins, and a pair of black orc ears will reward 100 Tang coins. What is this Tang coin? The Tang dynasty in which Richard was in is different from the Tang dynasty in the history of the earth. Richard really didn't know the value of this Tang coin. After reading the notice, Richard took a look at those boring colleagues, and found one of the short, kind-faced men and said, "Brother, you also know that my brain was smashed and lost my memory, this Tang, what is the value of the currency?" The short man looked at Richard with pity. He didn't expect that Richard had forgotten this basic common sense. But everyone has fought together after all, so naturally they will not embarrass Richard on such a small issue. One tang coin can probably be worth a consistent copper coin, but it is generally priceless. Tang coins are officially sold by Datang, with a special symbol of talisman printed on them. They are universal currencies that cannot be counterfeited. Using it, neighboring alien human nations can also use tang coins to purchase goods. Hearing this, Richard couldn't help but come up with the concept of copper coins. Obviously, he didn't inherit any memory of the original body, at least the value of the copper coins used by the original owner of the body still remains. The average adult man spends only 3 or 4 copper coins a day for a meal. There is always about 1,000 copper coins. The Datang chronology is the same as the Earth, 365 days a year. In other words, 1 tang coin is enough for an adult young man to eat for about a year. These tang coins are really valuable. Of course, the adult men's food here is calculated according to the minimum standard to fill their stomachs. If you want to eat well, it will definitely last less than a year. Killed a green-skinned orc by himself, didn't he mean that he could get 10 tang coins at once? Even if there are other people's help to share some, it can be a lot. Thinking of this, Richard woke up suddenly. He didn't harvest the killed green-skinned orc ears. The green-skinned orc's ear seems to have been cut away by Ma Hung-ji. Li Cha looked at the rest of the people. 6 of them got together in twos, just forming 3 piles. Obviously, they have cut off their own orc ears, which are obviously income in addition to the task rewards. No wonder these young men worked so hard. My share was cut away by Ma Hung-ji. I hope he is not the kind of person I think. At this moment, a small servant walked out of the door and called in after reading the names of 2 soldiers, but Ma Hung-ji did not come out. It didn't take long, the little boy came out again and called the 2 in. Soon, the remaining 2 also called in, and only Richard was left outside the door. At this time Richard's inner anxiety grew stronger. This group of people did not intend to play yin when they lost their memory. The guards guarding the door saw that only Richard was left outside the door, and there was no movement from inside. They couldn't help looking at Richard with a weird expression. One of the guards was even more sardonic, apparently thinking about it in his heart. What? Sure enough, there is no so-called justice between people in other worlds. When Richard was upset, the young man finally walked out and beckoned to Richard. You are Richard, come in with me. After Richard crossed the entry barrier and entered the house, he saw Ma Hung-ji and the 6 soldiers under his command in the yard. The 6 soldiers were full of joy. The package on his back was much heavier than before, obviously. Received the reward of satisfaction. A middle-aged man with 2 beards sits behind a long table in the middle of the yard. On the UU reading www.uuganshu.com table is neatly placed a stack of thick books, some of which are full of fonts. Some are blank. 2 officers stood behind the long table, with their palms gently dragged on the waist knife, staring at Richard blankly. After the little boy led Richard in the door, he returned to the middle-aged man sitting on the bench and whispered, Master, this is Richard who has a bad brain. Your brain, your whole family's brain is broken. Richard resisted the urge to explode and looked at each other coldly. At the same time, he clenched his long dagger in his sleeves tightly. This is his only weapon now. The large waist knife and spear were long before entering the house. It was searched by the guards. Of course, Ma Hung-ji and other 7 people were also seized of their weapons, only a short, close-fitting weapon was kept. This kind of short sword weapon is completely powerless to resist against a broadsword and a spear. As long as it is not met with a serious court order officer, it will not be searched. Richard, after your colleagues and the officer confessed, you flinched after encountering a green-skinned orc in this battle, and you were caught up by the green-skinned orc and broke your brain. By luck, you didn't die. If you are injured in the battle, you can alleviate your sin of retreat. All the rewards for this mission will be eliminated, and will be assigned to the criminal team to perform meritorious service. You only need to participate in a battle in the criminal team and win, and you can get freedom body. Can you confess your guilt? After hearing this trial, Richard was stunned on the spot. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen such a superficial reversal of right and wrong in broad daylight. What makes Richard the most hard is that Ma Hung-ji, who cared about him the most before, and his fellow robes who had fought together, stared at him like a dead person, without the slightest intention of giving any help. The town level is the lowest administrative unit of the Tang dynasty. Naturally, the guard is also the chief administrative officer of the world's Tang court. The guard takes over the military, administration, and judicial power, and is directly responsible to the county magistrate. He is the chief of a town, but guards the lower chief. The Tang court has no longer established imperial order officers, and it is naturally impossible for a large town to have only one guard and management. So, like the ancient courts of the earth, the local government of this alien Tang dynasty had a large number of officials in addition to ordinary servants. It's like the official Jing Sui standing in front of Richard at this time, who guards his subordinates who specializes in recruiting military merit statistics. Although the official has no rank, he is an indispensable assistant to guard. He is within his powers and responsibilities. The right to speak is great, so it is too easy to slander Richard, a villager who has no background. This kind of low-level officials have many rights, but they are not officially recognized by the court. That is to say, there is no salary paid by the court. The wages of the officials are basically directly responsible for the officials who hired them. Jing Sui's salary is dashi town. The guard paid out of his own pocket. Since ancient times, it has been easy for officials to be greedy for money, but it has been extremely difficult for them to pay. One can imagine how low the wages of these officials are. Officials are also different from ordinary officials. They belong to the court's second-line security forces and can receive military pay. As a result, the officials caught between the imperial order officials and ordinary officials are ignored. However, even if this kind of staff is not guaranteed and has not been recognized by the court, there are still people who break their heads and want to be elected, because there is no other reason. They have the power. Has power in his hand. Are you afraid of not having any income? Actually, most of the staff members do not rely on the salary that Shangguan pays out of their pockets, but the foreign wealth derived from the filial piety and duties of the people below. Of course, anyone who can become an official is not a fool. Naturally, he knows what kind of person can insult and what kind of person can't offend. In a wardern place like Angzi de Hufu, in order to encourage people's enthusiasm to serve as soldiers, the review of military merit is very strict. If there are a large number of soldiers going up, the guard will not hesitate to kill chickens and monkeys. Because of this, soldiers who go out to sell their lives generally don't have to worry about their merits being corrupted. However, the importance of military merit makes this piece of oil and water the most abundant, especially Jing Sui who specializes in this piece, knowing more about how high the reward of military merit is. In order to guard against the Simurans' rebellion and prevent the invasion of the beasts and the greenskins, Datang has worked hard from top to bottom. Greenskin is a monster of cannibalism, and there is no condition to make peace. However, everything is not absolute. For example, the soldier with amnesia in front of him, Jing Sui only needs to unite with Ma Hungji a little bit, and then appease the other soldiers. It is enough to turn the law of Tang dynasty into a weapon for his own exploitation. 5 orcs equals 50 Tang coins. This has not yet calculated the basic rewards for the mission. One less person can get more benefits. Everyone feels like a mirror. What's more, all of Richard's soldiers in the same village are dead, not at all. People speak for him. In addition to the defect of amnesia, if he does not kill Richard directly, Jing Sui feels that he is already benevolent. Of course, everyone at the scene knows that entering the prison squad is no different from sending to death. As the name suggests, the prison squad specializes in placing serious prisoners. Due to insufficient military strength, the Datang local government separates serious prisoners and death row prisoners into similar death squads. The existence of it is used as a cannon fodder for cleaning greenskins and lycanthropes. The promise says that you will be able to return to freedom after a few battles, but as long as your luck is not against the sky, there will be few who can leave alive after entering. Therefore, the criminal squad also has the title of Death Squad among the people. Although Richard lost most of his memory because the original owner of his predecessor was opened with a scoop on his head, there are still some impressions of the criminal squad's name. It is conceivable that he heard that he was about to be sent to the criminal squad. How ugly the expression is! This is to let him die, and I don't even plan to give him the chance to return home. Richard, this is the last chance I will win for you. It is a crime of decapitation to retreat in the Tang law. You only need to complete one combat mission in the criminal team and you can leave. It's an extra legal favor. You any other comments? Jing Sui said slowly. The two guards behind him had already drawn out their knives with a grin. As long as Richard dared to resist, he would immediately rectify the law on the spot. With the evidence from Ma Hongji and the rest of the soldiers, Richard, a mud-legged man with no background, would not even think of turning over in this life. As long as he enters the Dashi town criminal squad, Jing Sui has a way to let him go or not. Even the ordinary youth patrol team has such a high mortality rate for one mission, let alone the prison team that was originally used to scent death. It is not uncommon for the criminal team to be destroyed by the regiment. Ma Hongji, do you think so too? Richard's eyes turned to Ma Hongji coldly. He crossed over. Ma Hongji was the only one who helped him. This was the last chance he gave Ma Hongji. I am the loyal and righteous person of the Tang dynasty. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is proud of the battlefield of the country's battle, which is comparable to your kind of bravery. I didn't execute you on the spot, I have already opened my face to you. Hehe, okay, very good, you are all red-hearted and loyal people of Datang, and I am the only traitor, haha, this court really surprised me. Richard sneered sarcastically, and then his voice changed. I am willing to accept punishment, but I have a valuable relic that I want to give to my parents. I wonder if it is okay. Jing Sui's eyes flashed after hearing this, focusing on the word precious, and smiled and said to Ma Hongji, since Richard is your soldier, you can help him transfer it to his parents. Ma Hongji saw Jing Sui's eyes, and instantly understood, put on a friendly smile and came to Li Cha, don't worry, this is what I should do. Ma Hongji said that half of his mouth suddenly gushed a mouthful of blood. When he walked over, Richard took out the long dagger hidden in his sleeve and slammed it into the opponent's left chest. The common sense that the heart is on the left side of his chest is still known to Richard. You. Poof. Obviously, Richard's luck was good, and he just pierced Ma Hongji's heart. After less than a breath of effort, Ma Hongji was relieved. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing an enemy personally and getting a lucky coin. Listening to the sweet reminder sound in his mind, Richard breathed a sigh of relief, and he was right. Bold. Come, Richard killed his fellow robe in public, and executed it on the spot according to the law of Tang dynasty. Jing Sui shook his face when he saw Ma Hongji's death, and shouted in a stern face. After receiving the order, the two guards rushed up with their waist swords in their hands, and the other 6 soldiers like Richard took out their short weapons and retreated. Obviously, they did not intend to join the battle. However, in the eyes of everyone, Richard, who only has a long dagger in his hand, is simply not enough to fight against 2 guards holding waist knives. Dashi town is a border town. The guards and bureaucrats here are not inland and peaceful environments that will only catch thieves. Looks like goods, every once in a while the officers and yamen will be pulled out to eliminate the green skin that broke into the jurisdiction of Dashi town. It can be said that these differences are not much different from those of the patrol battalion soldiers in Dashi town. When the two officers were drawing their swords, Richard had already opened the personal panel and clicked to redeem a guard militia. I saw a flash of white light in front of Richard, and a thin man dressed in the costumes of the guards in the Middle and Late Ming dynasty appeared out of thin air, holding a red-lined iron-head spear in his hand. The two guards who charged up saw Li Cha standing in front of him out of thin air, standing still in place, with an expression of disbelief. Jing Sui behind him spit out a word in a trembling voice. Tao, Taoist, you turned out to be a Taoist who can summon battle puppets. The word Taoist was uttered, and the two guards who had stayed in shape took a few steps back without hesitation, with a look of fear on their faces. At this time, the two guards at the door also rushed in. It happened to see Richard and a man with a spear, who was expressionless and dressed in a costume that he had never seen before, confronting the others, and Ma Hongji was staring at him at his feet. Dead body. Taoist priest? It turns out that Taoist priests from the Tang dynasty in the different world possessed this ability. No wonder they could stand firm under the infinite green skin invasion of fertility. Richard looked at the look of fear in the opponent's eyes, and boasted without blushing, I am the 18th generation of disciples under the seat of the immeasurable heavenly sovereign. Say, if you beat me as a rebellion, aren't you afraid that the immeasurable heavenly Lord will drop the thunder and smash you into fly ashes? Immeasurable Tianzun? Jing Sui and his group are collectively in a state of confusion. Who is the immeasurable Tianzun? Haven't heard of it. Also, what is the situation of the 18th generation disciples? Is your immeasurable heavenly sovereign a 1,000-year bastard? Has it been passed down to the 18th generation and is still alive? Richard saw that the four officers were shocked by his own words, and immediately whispered to the guard militiamen under his command, kill them. System soldiers are absolutely loyal to Richard. No matter what order Richard gives, he will complete it regardless of his own life. All of them are comparable to dead soldiers. It's just that the militia of the health post is obviously malnourished, not to mention that it is compared with a strong army officer. I am afraid that even my own body is not as good as. Fortunately, the militiamen of the guards used spear weapons. When the guards on the opposite side were thinking about which great god immeasurable Tianzun was, they rushed over silently, and just plunged into the chest of the guards directly opposite. Jing Sui's little boy next to Jing Sui saw an officer falling to the ground bleeding, his legs softened and he sat down directly on the ground. An unpleasant smell permeated from the stalls. Jing Sui, who is the closest to the young man, pinched his nose, kicked the young man who was peeing on his trousers fiercely, and angrily scolded the rice bucket. This little boy is an orphan who was adopted by his master's family since he was young, and he rarely walks out of Dashi town on weekdays. Where can I see this kind of battle? The officer next to the dead officer saw that his colleague was pierced in the blink of an eye, and immediately reacted. Driven by his combat instinct, he slashed at the guard militia who was putting away his spear. He snorted. Richard was greatly disappointed by the speed of response of the militia of the garrison, and the knife was slashed on his left arm, and the left arm of the militia of the garrison was removed directly. The militia of the guardian was staggered, and under the loyal will, he actually resisted the pain for a lifetime, and stabbed the officer with a red spear in one arm. However, with precautions, the response speed of the guards was much stronger than that of the militiamen of the guards. A standard Tang sword can easily swing the red spear away. At this moment, the officer suddenly felt a huge force coming from his side. It turned out that Richard saw the two officers rushing in from the door and wanted to move forward. He had to go to battle and knock down the officer in front of him. With a move, another guard militia appeared in the open space beside him. It was the Chi Luck coins obtained by the first guard militia after assassinating the guards. The officer who was knocked down by Richard just remembered to stand up, and a red spear pierced from above and plunged into his throat fiercely. When the second guard militiaman retracted its spear, the first guard militia had its neck chopped off by two guards who ran from behind. In the next scene, the hearts of the two officers trembled involuntarily, and saw the body of the first dead guard militia flashed by a white light, and all his weapons disappeared. Is such a delay, Richard has got up and exchanged for the 3rd Guard militia. At this time, Jing Sui behind Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com was so scared that his legs and feet were weak, and he fled towards the back door of the house with his hands and feet together, unable to get up quickly. Compared with Jing Sui, the remaining 6 soldiers who had come with Richard were very quick to move. After the death of the 2nd officer, the 6 had already escaped from Richard's sight. The departure of the 6 made Chief Richard a sigh of relief. If the 6 patrols who were desperately fighting with the green-skinned orcs, Qing Zhuang, would be beaten to death in minutes by himself and the 2 guard militias. The officer did not leave, but the patrol soldiers who received the reward fled. This is mainly because the responsibilities of the 2 parties are different. The patrol team here does not have the responsibility of suppressing rebellion, but the officer does. If the officer escapes, it is equivalent to breaking the law of the Tang dynasty. Besides, the 6 patrol soldiers do not have the combat weapons in their hands. Naturally, they will not go forward with short weapons stupidly and desperately. They are not desperate Richards, so why bother to make fun of their own lives? Moreover, Richard's call from the guard militia after another really frightened the 6 patrol soldiers. In this regard, the 2 guard militias holding red-tasseled spears face to face with the 2 guards. The 2 guards could not figure out the foundation of the guard militia. The way the guard militia appeared and the phenomenon of disappearing after death made the 2 guards cautious. Treat. The 2 guard militiamen didn't do anything, mainly because Richard knew that the guard militia Oneonun was not an opponent in Dashi town with combat experience at all. During the confrontation, Richard picked up a tang knife left by a dead officer, and came to the boy who was peeing his pants. "I'm sorry, I just want to live." The young man fell on his back to the ground with his throat, and as his body convulsed, his breath was completely cut off. It is another Qiyun coin. The physical fitness of this young man is obviously not as strong as those of the 2 officers, and he can still get a Qiyun coin. Doesn't this Qiyun coin mean that the stronger the individual, the more he can get? In other words, the physical fitness of Xiao Si and the physical fitness of the officer look different, but in fact they belong to the category of ordinary people? After hearing the prompt in his mind, Richard changed his mind. Then, the 4th Guard militia appeared beside him. After Jing Sui saw that the rebellious wiped the neck of the collapsing boy without mercy, his whole body was agitated, his legs were not numb, and his waist was not sore. The crisis of death made Jing Sui a strong desire to survive broke out in an instant, and he disappeared at the corner of the back door of the house with 1 shot, 3 steps, and 2 steps. When Richard looked up to look for Jing Sui, where could he see the slightest figure? Richard turned around. At this time, only himself and the 3 guard militiamen were left in the courtyard, as well as 2 guards facing each other with swords. These 2 guards did not mean to go forward and desperately. Although they were limited by their duties, they could not leave this dangerous place, but they also knew that after Jing Sui and the soldiers of the patrol team left, it would not take long to bring large troops. At that time, regardless of whether Richard was a genuine Taoist priest, he would be swallowed up by the army. Daoshu was wonderful, but he couldn't directly face the resistance army, and besides summoning soldiers out of thin air, Richard did not use other Daoshu. Obviously he was not a master of Daoshu. Therefore, the 2 officers are naturally happy to spend their time here. After seeing the 2 guards in a defensive posture, Richard naturally saw what was in the other party's heart. He knew that if the 2 were not resolved, he would not want to walk out of this private house safe and sound today. This private house is very close to the yamen in Dashi town. Not far from the patrol camp in Dashi town, when the reinforcements arrive, he might be suppressed immediately. Thinking of this, Richard can no longer care about the horrible fighting power of the guard militia. In any case, the guard militia has a big advantage and not afraid of death. Kill! Richard yelled, and the 3 guard militiamen who led the command rushed over with the red-tasseled spears shoulder to shoulder in time. At the same time, Richard also held the standard tang that was taken from the body of the officer. The knife followed. Under the rigid movements of the guard militia, 3 red-tasseled spears stabbed indiscriminately, and the 2 guards' instinctive knives that had been prepared for defense were swung away. From the action point of view, the reaction of the 2 guards was comparable to that of guards. The militia is much stronger. However, there was a Richard at the back of the guard militia. In the crisis of life and death, Richard squeezed out his full potential, and while the 2 guards were blocking with knives, he rushed up and slashed at one of them. The waist side vacated by the officer. With a tear, a hole was drawn on the guard's belly. The guard couldn't help taking a few steps back and exhaling in pain. When the officer set a knife to block the red spear, he could barely guard his upper body, but was unable to return to the waist in time. As a result, Richard saw him in the gap and chopped it over. This kind of face-to-face life-and-death fight does not require hundreds of rounds of battle. It can often kill people with 1 or 2 moves. After all, the human body is too fragile. Under the pain of the officer who was chopped with a knife on the waist, the tang knife wielded in his hand suddenly lost its control. Then, under the pressure of a guard militia and Richard, he was quickly stabbed in the chest by a gun. Another officer who was entangled by the militiamen of the 2 guards saw his companion die. His eyes were splitting, his eyes flashed fiercely, he suddenly gave up the tendency to block, and swept the opposite one with a tang knife in a desperate posture. The neck of the guard militia. He thought that the guard militia on the opposite side would take the spear and dodge under the threat of life, so he could take advantage of the situation and smash the red spear of the other guard militia to escape. The last officer knew that he could not pick 4 by 1, and in the face of death, the punishment for breach of duty had been forgotten by him. It's a pity that this has ignored the fact that the militia on the opposite side is not afraid of death at all. Under the horrified gaze of the guard militia that he smashed did not retract his spear at all, and turned a blind eye to the tang dao sweeping his throat. With both hands, he used his spear to thrust into the guard's belly with a steady stab. At the same time, the sharp standard tang knife made a more than 10 cm wide opening in the throat of the guard militia, and blood spewed out without money. After the 2 injured each other, the red spear of another guard militia followed and plunged into the guard's chest. The spear was too deep and even stuck in the breastbone. Spurted out a mouthful of old blood, and the last officer's eyes widened and the guard militia who had his throat cut on the opposite side fell to the ground together. Soon, the dying guard militia flashed by with a black light, and disappeared together with the blood and weapons splashed on the ground, leaving no trace of their own in this world. Li Cha looked at the officer who fell to the ground and died. Yu reading www.yukansha.com's face became very gloomy. The action of this officer was too fast. As soon as he finished killing the opponent, he lost a guard militia with his life. Richard used the 2 Kyun coins he obtained to exchange for 2 guard militias again. He glanced at the personal interface, and the advancement bar for the prestige task that earned 10 Kyun coins had reached 6/10. Richard now has 4 living guard militiamen under his hand, and only needs to kill 4 more enemies to complete the prestige mission and increase the prestige star. Richard was afraid that the reinforcements of Dashi town who had come to be assisted were betting on the right. He didn't even search for the body of the guard. He picked up 2 tang knives and tied them to his back. After he picked up a tang knives in each hand, he didn't look back. Bringing the guard militia rushed out of the residence. While running away, Richard asked the guard militia nearby, "Can you use tang knife?" The militiamen of the Guardian militia swept the tang dao that Richard had handed them with their indifferent eyes without emotion, and shook their heads and said, "Return to sir, we cannot use other weapons, nor can we wear other armor." "Then do you need to eat?" "Need, our body functions are no different from ordinary people. If you don't eat or drink, you will be hungry and thirsty, leading to weakness. In severe cases, you will lose your strength and die." Richard looked at the guard militia who spoke rigidly, but the logic of the response was not problematic, and he roughly understood the nature of these system soldiers. They should be a group of fighters with no personal emotions, but they have the intelligence and communication ability of a normal person. There is only this kind of person who can look directly at death in the face of battle, that is, the opponent's combat effectiveness is really unsatisfactory. The feeling for Richard is that an ordinary man who has never fought before just picked up a spear. He doesn't look like a real soldier except that he is cruel and courageous enough. No vendors are allowed outside the residence of the reporting office. It is close to the yamen of Dashi town, and ordinary Shendu people rarely come here. So after the heavily armed Richard walked out, he didn't meet any outsiders. But just as they turned a street, they encountered many ordinary passers-by. Dashi town is located in Central Asia. The Han immigrants in the town are not even as crowded as they are. In fact, Dashi town was originally a town in a small country in Central Asia. Later, when the army of Tang came, it became Dashi town. The Simu people in the Tang population in this world are actually the typical Central Asian race that Richard has seen on the earth in his previous life. They are very different from the Han people, and the color of their eyes is different from that of the Han people. The word Simu comes from the different colors of the eye pupils of the Central Asian race. Of course, in the Han population of the Tang dynasty, the Simu is a derogatory term. Contains the meaning of second-class discrimination. In fact, this is true. Although more than 60% of the population in Dashi town are native Simu people, the people who really occupy the ruling class and serve as soldiers are all Han people. Although Datang has also established a servant army led by Simu people, they are all cannon fodder. Frontline troops. The most important thing is that the young and young Han Chinese in Dashi town are either in business or in the army, or they are the owners of individual shops and ordinary clerks, and passers-by on the street look at them. Almost all of them are the faces and costumes of people with eyes. The militiamen of the guards were naturally Han faces, and the elders on the street saw Richard, who was wearing a weapon, hurriedly across the street with 4 guards militias. All of them evaded in horror, for fear that they might collide with these few in their hands. Han people with weapons. You should know that in the towns under the rule of the Tang dynasty, the laws for the Simu people and the Han people are completely different. At the legal level, the Simu people have been reduced to second-class people. Otherwise, the Simu people will not always be there. Against the rule of the Tang dynasty. After Li Cha rushed into the street with people, he looked at the unarmed lesbians around him. He couldn't help but resent his guts. He raised the Tang knife in his hand and slammed a male who passed him by his shoulders. Tang Dao sank in from the back of the young man, and the tip of the knife came out from the heart of the left chest. Richard pulled out the Tang knife, looked at the slender man who had lost his breath. His brows were frowned. He did not receive the reward of luck coins. In other words, this hapless passerby has no hostility towards him. It's killing. Richard's behavior of stabbing passers-by to death in the street immediately detonated on the street. Passers-by and street vendors fled in all directions, and the whole neighborhood was in chaos. Richard saw this chaotic scene, his eyes lit up. He wielded Tang knife and led 4 guard militiamen to drive away the chaotic ordinary passers-by, rushing towards the gate of Dashi town. Dashi town is not very big, it is just an ordinary small and medium-sized town, and large towns are generally set up as the county seat. Richard went all the way to the gate of Dashi town along the main road of Dashi town. Other unknowing passers-by saw the murderous Richard and his party chasing behind with a sharp knife. They were so frightened that they joined the fleeing team. Chaos was in Richard and his party. Driven by people, expand further. At this time, the large team of government officials brought by Jing Sui had just entered the previous reporting residence. Jing Sui scanned the 6 corpses on the ground with embarrassment, and a muscular man with a Tang knife in his hand gave a cold expression. Jing Sui. Where is the prisoner? Zhao catches his head and stays safe. The Taoist priest must have not left too far. We are now ordering people to close the city gate and the whole town to make a big call. Jing Sui smiled and said to the muscular man, it was obvious that the identity of Zhao Kata was above Jing Suiai. In Dashi town, both the errand and the official are under the control of the head catcher. The official is actually the errand on duty in the yamen. The salary is the same as that of the ordinary errand, but the job can be easier. The guards are the ordinary security forces in Dashi town, equivalent to the civilian police in Richard's previous life. Yamen is equivalent to a police officer in the town police station. Of course, because of the frequent wars, officers and government officers are often dragged outside Dashi town to fight with real green swords and guns. In addition to their functions, there is not much difference in combat effectiveness between government officers and officers. Because Dashi town is located in the border area, to be a head catcher here, you must at least step into the threshold of a martial artist. For example, this Zhao catcher is a low-grade martial artist who has stepped into the realm of flesh and blood. He can hit 800 kilograms of power with a full punch. Ordinary escorts can't hold the full punch of this Zhao catching head. This is the terrible thing about the warrior, and the low-grade warrior is just the lowest level of the warrior, and the realm of flesh and blood is also the entry level of the warrior. Close the city gates and the whole city? Do you know how much impact this will have? At that time, will you bear the responsibility or I will fight it? The head of Zhao catching stared at Jing Suiai aggressively, and asked mercilessly. It was just a report about the military merits of the patrol team, and 6 people were killed. 4 of them were still on duty. Zhao Catchhead could think of Jing Suiai's unshirkable responsibility with his ass. If it weren't for Jing Suiai's eldest daughter to be a concubine guarding the adults, Zhao Haota would have ordered Jing Suiai to be arrested and accused. Zhao's head catching is not complaining that Jing Suiai set up a set of young and strong recruits, but hating this Jing Suiai for doing things without thinking. You shit, can't you touch Richard's bottom before putting on the set? You can provoke a Taoist priest who can summon battle puppets? Of course, Zhao catching his head would not say these things clearly. Although Jing Suiai is a bit greedy, his daughter is the guardian of the adult's bed. There is no order to guard the adult. No one in Dashi town should think about moving scenery. Just a vellus hair. If it weren't for Jing Suiai who gave birth to a beautiful daughter, he wouldn't have been able to get such a fat man who specializes in military service reports and rewards. At this moment, an officer suddenly ran in from outside the door and reported loudly, "My lord, there is a group of armed bandits on Dashi Street who kill at sight, causing a huge chaos. They are running to the city gate." Dashi Street is the main road of Dashi town, leading directly to the main entrance of Dashi town. As soon as Zhao caught the head, he no longer cared about Jing Suiai, and quickly ordered, "Come here, make a quick report to the city gate guards to intercept the fugitive prisoners. You go and notify the Korean team in the patrol camp, there are puppets in the city that can summon battle puppets. The Taoist priests of the Jianghu are guilty of riots and are fleeing towards the main entrance." Yes. After the commander took the order, he hurried out of the house and stepped on his horses and ran towards the patrol camp. At the same time, 2 government officials rushed out of the house and stepped on the military horses dedicated to communication and drove toward the front door. The yamen in Dashi town are not rich, and the few military horses are mainly used for communication. After the informant left, under the leadership of Zhao Butu, hundreds of yamen lined up in a long snake marching queue and quickly rushed to the location of the incident. "Everyone copy the guy and go to the city gate with Lao Tzu to maintain order." Chief Jian Sen, who is in charge of the main gate of Dashi town, shouted to the soldiers in the tower. On the street below the city gate, the chaotic crowd rushed out of Dashi town from the main entrance like headless flies. The 4 soldiers at the gate of Dashi town could not stop the crowd at all. At this time, Dashi town is still in a peaceful state. Although it is located in the border Central Asia today does not even have a decent indigenous country. It was either conquered by the Tang dynasty or reduced to a ration of beasts and green skins. The indigenous peoples of Central Asia can only be scattered to form settlements or larger tribes to gather for warmth. They even have a problem with self-protection, not to mention the Angzi Protectorate who counterattacked the Tang dynasty. While greenskins and beasts brought a huge threat to the Tang dynasty, they also cleared the way for the expansion of the Tang dynasty to clear the obstacles of the countries of Central Asia, which are both pros and cons. It is precisely because of the proliferation of greenskins and beasts that the Simu people in Central Asia will become second-class citizens under the rule of Angzi Dohu. There are still a large number of Simu people who are willing to survive under the rule of the Han people. Enslavement. Compared to being eaten by greenskin, being enslaved by the Han seems to be a good option. Of course, the Simu people are not all content with the status quo. Many Simu people are enjoying the protection of Datang's military power while forming various underground organizations in secret in an attempt to overthrow the local rule of the Tang dynasty and the restoration of Central Asia. It was even spread all over the Angzi prefecture. Although the restoration movement has never been successful, there will be some riots every year, so that the swords of the Han people are stained with blood. As the saying goes, where there is oppression, there is resistance, and the most indispensable thing in this world is the kind of overwhelming stunner. Fortunately, there is a greenskin tribe around Dashi town, so the Simu people under Dashi town's rule are very well behaved. They don't want to let the Tang army in Dashi town disappear, otherwise, Dashi town will be eaten by that greenskin tribe in minutes. Scum. Because of the stability of the Simu people, Dashi town only stationed a Tenman team at the main gate of Dashi town on weekdays, and it was in charge of a leader. Now in the event of an emergency, this Tenman team even prevents the chaos from attacking the city gate. Less than. The city of Dashi town is simple and simple. There are only two gates. One is the main gate that connects to the main road, which is always open on weekdays. The other is a small back gate that connects to the street behind the yamen in Dashi town. It is tightly locked on weekdays. It will be activated only when an unbeatable enemy is attacking the city, for the Han people in Dashi town to flee. When Qiansen rushed down the city gate with the remaining 6 soldiers, he looked at the chaotic civilians in hordes, with a speechless expression. He wisely did not choose to stop the turbulent crowd, otherwise he would not be found if he was trampled to death. To the culprit. In this way, the 10 soldiers guarding the main gate of Dashi town and their elders, 4 watched the crowds gushing out of the city gate cave, and 7 stood on the edge of the city gate cave watching the chaos fleeing Dashi town. This state did not last long, and Qiansen and his team found Richard and his 4 guard militiamen behind the crowd like driving a flock of sheep. Only those 5 people in the crowd had weapons in their hands. If Qiansen didn't know what to do, he would be stupid. Come with me, go down and arrest the 5 thugs, dare to resist, and rectify the law on the spot. The chaotic world uses heavy codes. In this alien Tang dynasty, the control of weapons is very strict. If officers and soldiers encounter resistance, they can directly kill people without reporting, as long as sufficient evidence is found afterwards and reasonable reasons are given. For these soldiers who have seen blood in the patrol battalion in Dashi town, killing a few chaotic people is nothing at all, even if they are Han people. Let alone border towns like Dashi town, even in the interior of Datang, the official government has the right to kill the mob at any time. After all, there are many scattered warriors in the rivers and lakes who are unwilling to submit to the court. It's a rare thing. The fled rioters saw that the soldiers of the patrol camp who had been watching a show suddenly rushed over with their weapons, and they avoided the way out. At this point, Richard and his party and the 6 soldiers led by Qiansen faced each other. The soldiers of the patrol battalion are different from the guards. They all have spears in their hands and tang swords slung around their waists. They are the well-known field troops in Dashi town. If they weren't performing the task of guarding the city gates, they would even be equipped. Get a shield or bow and arrow. You and other mobs quickly lay down their weapons, otherwise we won't blame us for enforcing the Tang law on the spot. Qiansen looked at the oncoming Richard and his party and immediately shouted. At the same time, his 6 soldiers gathered together quite tacitly and formed a spear to intercept in front of Richard's and his party. Of course, Qiansen, who is a very long man, stands on the side of the spear with a tang knife in his hand. Richard saw the soldiers of the patrol battalion intercepted in front, and knew that he wanted to escape, and he had to break the interception of the opponent, otherwise he would be sifted into a sieve in minutes. The opponent could set up a horizontal formation in such a short time. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com is obviously a well-trained veteran. Richard glanced at the garrison militia who had no expression behind his eyes, and he was stunned. He gave a solemn order to the garrison militia, rush over, stabbing one to death, no loss, stabbing two to make a profit. The militiamen of the Guardian all responded, and they were also lined up in a horizontal row. Richard passed over the slowing down and rushed forward in silence. Qiansen saw the four people on the opposite side not saying a word, spearing straight, his eyelids trembled violently. This trademark is a group of desperados. The 6 soldiers from the patrol battalion who were originally lined up in a horizontal formation can't help but feel a little flustered when they see the opposing group desperately trying to defend themselves. Although they are veterans, they are ultimately afraid of death. The most important thing is that these 6 soldiers thought they were facing only a few mobs, and they were not mentally prepared to die on the battlefield. With such a dazed effort, the 4 guard militiamen and 6 spear patrol soldiers slammed into each other. The 4 guard militiamen were not accidentally penetrated by 6 spears, but the opposite, the soldiers of the 6 patrol battalions were also uncomfortable. They did not have shields to protect, and because of the instinct to execute orders, they did not dare to retreat and avoid them. As a result, 4 red-tasseled spears of the guard militia were actually plunged into their bodies. The intrepid guard militiamen were dying, they used their last bit of strength to pierce the red spear deeper. The 2 platoons of spearmen were tied together like this, vomiting blood, and the exchange was exchanged. The faces of the 2 surviving soldiers among the 6 were blank at first, and then suddenly backed a few steps, looking at the corpses lying on the ground overlapping each other. Soon, black lights flashed on the ground one after another, and the bodies of the 4 guard militiamen disappeared.